Okay, Matt has been disconnected.
Go for it. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this third and final of our Run Inspired webinar series. For those of you that haven't joined before, I'm John Brewer. I'm a Professor of Sports Science based in the UK, where I have to say it's extremely cold and very icy, causing chaos with internet today. And I'm delighted today to be joined by somebody who I know is very familiar to all of you, and that's my good friend Talib Al-Salami, who is really a bit of a legend in running with ADNOC and, of course, indeed in Abu Dhabi. So, Talib, rather than me introduce you, I'll hand over to you and you introduce yourself to everybody who's joining us this afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Probably a familiar face. I've been through the floors here to promote the ADNOC Marathon. My name is Talib Al-Salami, Senior Engineer. Started my running journey in 2016, joined all editions of ADNOC Marathon, and this edition will be my 5th. I've done all 9 full marathons altogether, and this marathon will mark my 10th marathon. Did 3 world majors. I did New York in 2022, London and Berlin in 2023, hopes and dreams to do Tokyo and Chicago of next year, and of course ADNOC Marathon. I'm a team co-founder and team captain of Abu Dhabi running team. Also, board member and head of community sports of Abu Dhabi Athletics Club. Back to you, John.
So thanks, and such an impressive CV there. I wonder, just sort of reflecting on your 9 marathons so far, which one stands out? Which for you is, if you could just have one more and encapsulate it, which is the one that for you is been the very best?
Quite honestly, not my fastest one, but the last edition of ADNOC Marathon of 2022. It was that one marathon where I thought, I'm gonna wing it. I'm just gonna go with my gut feeling. I'm not gonna worry about the time. I don't have a particular goal in mind. My goal is just to finish. And I just came back from New York Marathon like a month before that. And at that moment, I could not break 4 hours. Something happened when I just released that thought, and I did my first sub 4 hour marathon of 3:51 at ADNOC Marathon. And it just keeps coming back to mind every single time I do a marathon.
Brilliant. In fact, I'll almost do the flip side of that and talk about my worst experience, which was my first ever attempt at a marathon, and it's the only time I've not finished. And I was a young and very competitive student at Loughborough University in the UK. And marathon running in this country was very much, for the general population, was very much in its infancy. It was actually the second ever London Marathon that I was running in, and decided to be very competitive and push myself, hoping to get some sort of incredible time of around 2.5 hours. And unfortunately, I pushed myself too hard. I didn't do any of the things that we've been talking about over the last 2 of these seminar series, nor what we'll be talking about today. I didn't drink properly. I didn't pace myself properly. I didn't set off at the right speed. Probably hadn't, in hindsight, done enough training. And in the end, I ended up collapsing and in hospital. Collapsed about 1 kilometre from the finishing line, and ended up spending the night in hospital on a drip and in quite a bad way. So I think what you're saying, which is, if you just relax, do everything correctly, you can have a great experience. My opposite of that is if you become too competitive and you think you can almost take the marathon distance for granted, and you get things wrong. When you get things wrong in a marathon, it can be extremely bad. So none of us are infallible, but I think your advice around just relaxing and enjoying the day, enjoying the event is really important. And of course, it's just 10 days to go. And I'm mindful as well that we're not just talking about the marathon today, we're talking about the 10K and the relay and the 5K and the fun run, the 2.5K as well. For me, when you're about 10 days out, you start to get, obviously anticipation. It's something that's in the forefront of your mind, not even the background of your mind, the forefront of your mind nearly all the time. How do you find that you cope with that sort of feeling of anxiety, that final 10 days in the build up to the race?
Well, personally, I've been asked that question basically many times from ADNOC employees, other team members, that they sort of like freak out at this time, and there's always that one question that stands out: will I be able to finish? Whichever the distance, whether it's 2.5, 5K, 10K, a relay, or even a full marathon, particularly a full marathon. I assure them to trust the process. They've been training for months. There's no need to panic, and they shouldn't start too fast, too soon. As you said, the beginner's mistake where you get overly competitive. You just start off really fast, too quick, too soon, and then you end up not finishing the marathon. And that on its own makes you feel a certain type of way that, I'm not good enough, for example. But if you take your time and you pace yourself well, there is all of that should just dissolve. And it's a progress. It takes time. Progress takes time. So they shouldn't basically just fly on the start line. So the moment they keep that idea in mind, I think everybody should have that certain perspective where, just take your time. It's just another long run. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, really great advice. I think obviously from a training perspective, Talib, now all the hard kilometers have been done, all the miles, kilometers, meters have been run. It's really a case of tapering. Maybe one more reasonable run this weekend, just to sort of stretch your legs out, but it's certainly not going to have any real benefit for your final marathon running performance. It's a case of winding down, tapering, trying to get as much sleep as you can. And I want to talk about sleep in a moment or two. And also, of course, as we've spoken about previously, fueling correctly, making sure you're taking in all the carbohydrate that is now needed to stop building up the carbohydrate, the glycogen stores, to make sure that when you stand on the start line in the early hours of the 16th of December, that you're fully fueled and ready to go. So I think most people now should be relaxing, as you said, and making sure that they just get themselves in the right state, both mentally and physically, to stand on the start line before the 42-kilometre marathon run. What sort of things would you be doing? What was your training be, or what will your training be, I should say, this weekend? What will you be running? What distance?
This weekend we'll be doing an easy 18K. It's very relaxed, very social. We're just gonna, have a conversation all over throughout that long run, and we're gonna change location so we get familiar with certain parts of the marathon route. We've been doing it in Khalij Al Arabi, where it's just one of the biggest segments in the marathon. We've already done that part, so I'm going to change the scenery a little bit just to sort of get used of how the look and feel of the basically the last stretch of the marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing as well, something that I always find very useful is to just sort of visualize how you're going to be feeling on the start line, visualize the start of the race. And also I've always found, I don't know whether you find the same, something very motivational, which is to visualize yourself finishing the race, because those last 200 or 300 meters, and I watched so many people finishing the marathon race last year in Abu Dhabi. When you turn left and come into that sort of funnel of the finishing line with all the people and the stands and the media, if you can visualize the excitement that you will inevitably feel when you do that, I think that's a good way of motivating you to do the race and to succeed in the race itself.
Absolutely. As you said, it's a phenomenal experience. Yeah. All of that hard work for X number of hours, and then you go to that, you see the chute, right? 200 meters just before the chute, just before you pass under it and receive that medal that really has so much meaning to a lot of us, that some people would say, oh, it's just a finisher medal. Well, no, that's months and weeks of hard work. We haven't had the best weather here to train with, but at the end of the day, it's something that it's an amazing achievement just to cross the finish line of 42 kilometers. It's something outstanding for the number of marathons that I've done and the number of marathons I've done. Every single time you pass that finish line, it has that feeling. You sort of get emotional, and you get,
Yeah.
that sense of relief that this actually happened.
Yeah,
I'm done.
absolutely. Very much so. Just sharing an anecdote there, and I remember in 2017 I was running the London Marathon with a lady who used to be a news presenter, still is a news presenter, but she used to be with the BBC. She's with another channel now, and she was also acting as an ambassador for a charity that was supported by Prince William and Princess of Wales, Catherine. And what I didn't realise was that they were effectively waiting for her at the finish. So when we crossed the finish line together, instead of initially collecting my medal, she pulled me over to the left. And all of a sudden, for about 20 minutes, I found myself chatting with the future King and Queen of England, whilst sweating, smelling, and looking in a terrible state. But what a fantastic experience that was, Talib. And when they do eventually become King and Queen, I will always have that memory in my own mind of when I met them, probably for the one and only time, sweating and smelling, and they probably think of me as some horrible little fella that they didn't want to get too close to, or won't want to get too close to again. We spoke about your training this weekend, 18 kilometres. What about for the rest of the week? Will you be doing much running between Sunday and Saturday?
The training program is pretty much light. I would personally focus on doing shorter recovery runs, 5K here and there, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, stretching, resistance band training, a little bit of strength here and there, not too much, not too heavy. Foam roller, for those who are not familiar with foam roller, it does works magic. All of that lactic acid buildup needs to be gone before the day of the marathon. And this week and the next week, the training plan is going to be pretty much the same, but it's going to be reduced significantly just to sort of keep us in the zone, keep that flow, and not lose momentum. But some of the beginners have thought that, okay, the last 2 weeks I'm going to just sit, eat a lot of spaghetti, do nothing. No. We need to keep moving. We need to stay focused. We need to keep that momentum going all the way to the marathon day responsibly. Don't go crazy. Just keep that flow.
Yeah, very, very correct. One of the things that we have touched on over the last 2 webinars is the very early start time of the marathon, and I realise that's very much from a climatic perspective with the heat building up, but the night before can be very difficult to plan, particularly if you're having to get up extremely early. I don't know what time you'll be getting out of bed, but are you sort of starting to set your alarm clock for fairly early times this week so that your body is getting conditioned to being awake at the time of the day when you'll need to be awake for the marathon start?
Well, believe it or not, up until 2 weeks ago, our long runs started at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
So we even get up way before 5. I'd say personally, I get up at 3:45, get ready, drive to the location of the long run. So, and we get about 50 people. So those who have been doing their long runs that early are pretty much familiar with even an earlier start time rather than just 6 a.m. The only difference here is that, okay, people tend to get competitive on the day of the marathon. I wouldn't say with complete disregard of their training, but it just out of excitement. We've been trying different types of breakfast. People have been experimenting with gels and all of that. So right now, if everything is in place, it's just a matter of when are they going to hear that horn to just start the run.
Yeah, great. Before we go on any further, actually, Talib, I just need to mention that we have got the chat room up and running again today. And if anybody wants to post any questions, we'll try and get through them either towards the end of the webinar or as we're going along. So please do feel free to use the chat box. And I've just seen one that's popped in at the moment. You talked very wisely about pacing yourself properly, and again, this is a conversation that we've had over the last couple of webinars. But I've run marathons before where you set off at a steady pace. You've got a target time in mind. And I've spoken to people on the course and said, you know, what's your target time? And they'll say, oh, you know, 4.5 hours. And you say to them, but hang on a minute, you're running at a pace that's 3-hour pace. And they say, oh yeah, but I feel great. You know, I feel fantastic. And I think that's always a problem that you've just alluded to, that you get to the start line and you can really very quickly throw away all the good effort and work that you've done in your training by setting off too fast at the start of the race. You'll burn the glycogen more quickly. I use the analogy of it's a bit like revving the car engine far too quickly and burning fuel very rapidly without covering a great deal of distance. You can do all of that damage by setting off too fast just because you feel great. And, you know, as I know from when I was in Abu Dhabi last year, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of people on the course, there can be noise with TVs and helicopters and all that sort of thing. It's way too easy to set off fast and get through the first few kilometers feeling great, because you should feel great in the first few kilometers of a marathon, and then suddenly, you know, using a car analogy, the wheels come off at sort of 30 kilometers. So I think proper pacing that's based on a realistic target time is absolutely critical. I'm sure you'd agree with that, and I'm sure you've seen people who've made the mistake of setting off too fast and really paying the price later on in the race.
I would definitely agree on that. That's why when you ask me what's my best marathon experience, my best marathon time was in Berlin, but the last ADNOC edition in 2022 was by far my best, because, as you said, I paced myself responsibly all the way to the 30 to 32K, and I felt great all from start to that point. And then I just kept that pace steady. I could have pushed harder, by the way, but I didn't. I just wanted to sort of continue on that because I'm not in a rush to get a PB that I cannot basically break in another marathon. You know, again, it's gradual. Not every race day is your day. Sometimes you have good races, sometimes you don't have good races or bad day. So it felt great from start to finish. I got that PB. It was just phenomenal all the way through. And I was actually smiling and talking throughout the distance. I wasn't even struggling. And people were looking at my pictures. They're like, how could you do that? How could you pull it off? I'm like, well, you know, after X number of marathons, you kind of, you know, put things in perspective. It took me 7 marathons to actually figure it out. But, you know, again, it takes time. As you said, I've seen people on the start line fly. But here's the tip. People should understand, full marathoners should understand, but particularly the first timers, that we are running with the marathon relay runners as well. Those are focusing on a shorter distance. So if you see someone flying by you, they could be doing their half marathon, and you just shouldn't just catch up randomly with anyone. So play it wisely. If you see someone just flying, they could be doing 20K or 22K relay. So don't burn out that energy thinking that person may be doing the pace that I'm looking for. So there will be pacers. I would recommend that following a pacer if you're doing it for the first time, or if you want to just relax and enjoy the scenery, you can do it at your own pace.
Yeah. Again, I'll give you a little anecdote there. When I was running the London Marathon with celebrities like the lady I was speaking about, and I've run it with UK celebrities quite a few times, and the marathon organisers, up until quite recently, and it may be partly because of a conversation I had with them, used to put all the celebrities on what they call the green start, which was the smallest of the 3 starts for the London Marathon, but also put us right at the very front. So literally, you were standing on the start line with 3,000 or 4,000 people behind you on the green start, and then when the other 2 starts, the red and the blue, merge, you're joining up with another 30,000 people. But of course, with the London Marathon, that's all races. You start normally by your start time. So the faster people at the front, the slower people are at the back. But the celebrities, ridiculously, start at the front, and so many of them do exactly what you just said, which is that they get worried because there's people whizzing past them, because inevitably they will do, and they speed up and they run alongside them, and before you know it, people who are quite inexperienced are finding themselves running at too fast a pace and burn up very, very quickly very quickly into the race. And I remember saying, again, to the same lady, Sean Williams, who I was running with when I met the King and Queen, future King and Queen, I should say, was it's going to be about 12 to 15 kilometers into the race before we start running with people. And if we run with people before then, we'll be running at too fast a speed. And she thought I was talking nonsense. But at the end of the race, she said, John, that was absolutely great advice, because pacing it properly and sensibly is absolutely the right way to go. Tally, this might be a good time. I can't really tell from my screen, just to go over the course and have a look at it. So if we can get the course on the screen for everybody, I think a good tip is to familiarise yourself with the route. Ideally, perhaps to go around it in a car or whatever, but at least to look at the map and work out where the different landmarks are. Now, I'm reasonably familiar with the start and finish. I'm familiar with the last couple of kilometres because I ran that when I did the 10K last year, but I think as you're much more familiar with the city than I am or ever will be, why don't you start us off, Talib, and just talk us through the first few kilometres, and I might just chip in with some thoughts on how the body's going to be feeling as you get around the distance.
Well, the first few kilometers from start to probably the 20K point, we're going to be running from ADNOC HQ building near ADNOC HQ. At some point after 5K point, we'll be merging into Al-Khalij Al-Arabi. And people don't believe me when I say this, but the entire 5 lanes of Al-Khalij Al-Arabi will be ours for at least 3 hours and a half. We'll be completely running in Al-Khalij Al-Arabi from start all the way to Officers Club Bridge before we take it and head back. By that point, by the 20K mark, the sun will be up fairly. You know, it wouldn't be too strong at that point. And then on the way back, going to Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed or Airport Road, the sun will be behind us. So people who are worried that it's going to be sunny, how am I going to handle it? Don't worry about that. There's plenty of hydration points along the way. I would suggest, regardless of the weather, to rehydrate at every station possible. A couple of sips should do, but I would like your intervention here, John, that hydration does not necessarily start on the course, but we have to do that a week before, 2 weeks before, get ourselves hydrated. Some of the mistakes that people fall into is that, we don't drink enough water throughout the day, and on the day we end up being very thirsty, dehydrated, not feeling good, maybe cramps here and there. So one of the tips here is that to get yourself hydrated throughout this week and all of next week, along with the other tip that you provided, that try to get enough rest and sleep, because recovery is essential as well.
Yeah, very much so. I think you're correct, and the importance of hydration, particularly in the climate that the runners will be experiencing, and this goes for the 10K as well, is to make sure you're properly hydrated beforehand and not rely on the fluid that you will take in on the course to hydrate you completely. Inevitably, you will dehydrate to some extent during the course of the race, but taking small amounts frequently, I think, is very important. I mean, one of the other good things with the entire route, Talib, I think you'll agree, but you do know it better than me, is that it's pretty flat. I don't think there are too many inclines that people need to worry about. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Even if there are an incline of bridges, it's very minor. For me, from my experience in the New York Marathon, you go through 5 huge bridges. It's not. It wasn't. It was fun, but it was difficult to a certain degree. But the bridges we've been through in the last edition of the marathon and this alteration of the route, they're going to be very minor. You're not going to feel them. Just pay attention that when you go up a bridge, don't go with your maximum speed. Always slow down, try to preserve energy, very relaxed, very comfortable. Don't think that slowing down for a couple of seconds that will affect your overall finish time.
No, not at all. And I think it's interesting in a sense, because we've spoken about pacing, and in most races of shorter distances, when you're feeling good, you often push yourself a little bit harder. I know if I'm doing a 10K and I get to 5 or 6K, I'm feeling good. Right now, I'm going to push harder and try and get a better time. I think with a marathon, when you're feeling good, if anything, just relax and even slow down a little bit and make sure you can continue feeling good for as long as possible. So my tip to anybody would be, if you're feeling good, don't see that as a sign to push yourself a little bit harder, unless it's at 41 kilometers, then you can push it to the finish. But it really is so important to pace yourself. And again, looking at the route, and one of the landmarks in Abu Dhabi that I have been fortunate enough to visit and thoroughly enjoy seeing is the Grand Mosque. And I think for me, mentally, you almost want to be getting to the Grand Mosque stage of the run feeling as good as you possibly can. Just relax and get there as easily as possible. And really then from the time when you pass the Grand Mosque, that's the time that you've really then got to start really focusing on the finish, digging in, staying at a sensible pace, not be tempted to speed up if you're feeling good, and just focus on that really critical part of the course between sort of 21, 22 kilometers and the finishing line, because that's where you can make or break yourself in a marathon. I don't know whether you've had any similar experiences to that.
Come again, John, sorry.
I said, I don't know whether you feel the same thing, Talib, that it's that last...
I do actually. Again, most of our training, most of our long runs, we did 25K and 30K and 28K around the Grand Mosque. We started doing two loops and a half or 3 loops, and then go to Al Khalij Arabi in reverse direction of the marathon. Most of those who joined us, they're pretty familiar with that. So I know on the day when they pass through that landmark, they'll say, oh, we've done our long runs in here. As you said, it gives you that sense of relief that half of the distance is done. We have to focus on the second part of it. And again, as I said, it's familiar territory. Most of the people who have done their long runs on that part, they're pretty familiar with it. So it's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, very much so. And I think as well, you get to that sort of 35, 40 kilometer point, that's when you really do have to start digging in. That's when things can be tough. You probably will be getting low on your glycogen stores, your energy stores, probably having to burn fat to keep the legs going, but it's really a good time to dig in. And when you turn left there for almost the final time and you're running along with the seafront on your right hand side, that's the time, as I say, you've got to put in the hard meters and just get yourself over the finish line. And I do want to talk a little bit about what I would term a survival strategy, Talib, which is, inevitably, sometimes things don't quite go to plan for whatever reason it might be. I've had that in marathons, and there is nothing wrong in having to slow down, maybe walk a bit, maybe jog a bit to get yourself over the finish line. And a mantra that I've used probably many times in this series is that, particularly if it's your first marathon, the objective is to complete the course, not to compete at it. And so I think if you do have to adopt a survival strategy, walk a bit, run a bit, that will still hopefully get you over the finish line.
Most definitely. Yeah. As you said, throughout the 9 marathons that I've done, not all of them were that smooth. Particularly my first one in 2018, 2019, when I've done my first ADNOC marathon, for the full distance. I did struggle. I did start off too fast. Started have to do the run walk strategy all the way to the finish line. My pace dropped from 6:30 to probably 8:30 or 9, and I just couldn't come back to it. And then that moment when I saw the finish line, 2 kilometers away from the finish line, my pace went from 8:30 to 5:15. I was just literally flying. So you might have to adapt that strategy. And I know a member of my team, to be honest, who have done that as well. He walked for a kilometer and he ran for a kilometer. And he did that alternatively all the way to the finish line and finished, in less than 5 hours. And I was surprised how relaxed he was when he reached the finish line. And people sometimes have that runner's ego that, if I walk, I'm a failure. No. That's completely fine. It happens to the best of us. It happens to you. It happens to me. If you watched Valencia's marathon, if you've seen Kiptagay finishing, he was carried from the finish line tired and exhausted because he was pulling off a phenomenal performance. But there's nothing wrong with it at all. You might have to adapt that. And one strategy to kind of go around these lines is on every hydration stop, you can actually slow down, walk a bit, drink, get your gel, get your nutrition, and pick it up. Don't just stop abruptly. Sometimes people just completely stop. Try to start to lower the pace gradually until you feel comfortable. Continue with that pace and maybe continue all the way to the finish line. If you feel great after some time, if you had your enough, you caught your breath, then you can pick up that pace that you want or continue on that pace. If you reach a point where you're completely exhausted and you do need to walk, then that's okay. You can walk, but make sure that you pick it up at some point and don't miss that opportunity to finishing at that glorious finish line.
Great. Now, I'm getting a few little Wi-Fi cutouts, so hopefully you're still seeing me okay, but I think our Wi-Fi gremlins that kicked off earlier this morning seem to be coming back. So fingers crossed everybody can still continue to hear and see me okay. Again, I think one of the comments I would make there, Talib, is that you've mentioned mixing walking and running, and if you look at the pace that you can achieve by walking and running, it's still a very respectable pace to finish the marathon in. I do think though that the critical thing is to still make sure you resume your running, because if you walk for too long, your legs can stiffen up and it becomes very difficult, and walking becomes the default go-to means of movement rather than running. And I know I once stopped in a marathon because somebody running near me fell over and hurt themselves, and I stopped to help them, that got first aid, and then I carried on and found it really, really difficult to get going again because my legs had stiffened up in the sort of 5 minutes or so that I was helping this lady to get treatment, what have you. So there is just a little bit of a risk there, but I think the key thing is get yourself to that finish line, and make sure that you mix a bit of walking and running if you absolutely have to. And when that happens, as you said, don't be down on yourself. There's no harm in that. It's not a bad thing. The most important thing is to get yourself over that finish line. And in the weeks, months to come, people won't be too worried about your time. They'll just be impressed with the fact that you have run a marathon. That's the critical thing. I'm just looking at some of the comments, and Lisa, I'm sure is known to all of you, is asking about sleep. And one of the things that I've said, and I know we spoke about sleep, is that the night before you can be very anxious, and you seem to wake up every 3 or 4 minutes almost. You probably hardly sleep at all. Fortunately, I've never seen anybody fall asleep on a marathon. I think if you're running a marathon, that will keep you awake. So if you do have a bad night's sleep the night before the race, don't worry too much about it. You will still get around the course. You'll probably sleep very well the following night, the night after the marathon, but on the day itself, or the night itself, the night beforehand, don't get into a panic just because you haven't slept that well. I don't know whether you sleep well the night before a marathon.
It's never the case. You always have that feeling that of anxiety and anxiousness, but as you said, you never miss it. You will never miss the race. You will get up on time. You probably get even a PB on when you feel like that. It's out of excitement. Some of us have established a buddy system, so we just kind of like make sure that we make sure that we are all awake. We're doing things in a group. But as you said, it all starts from prior to the marathon, similar to hydration. Just get yourself ready to having enough rest. The night before, it's always special in every single way.
Yeah. I think the key thing is not to do anything different as well. We've had this conversation. Don't eat something that's different. Don't try and do anything fancy.
Don't try something new.
Yeah.
Try something new on race day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You read online that there's some super product around, superfood. Don't have that for the first time, because you never know, it may come back to haunt you and even haunt others around you in a very bad way on the race itself. Just looking at another one of the comments from Dr. Miriam, asking whether a pace of 8 minutes, I'm assuming per kilometre, will enable you to finish within 6 hours. Well, if my maths is right, yes, it will, because 6 hours is 360 minutes, and 8 minutes per kilometre is 320 minutes. So I think 8 minutes per kilometre should finish you inside 6 hours. You're the engineer, Talib. Have I got the maths correct on that?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, you're natural.
Yeah. I think the key thing is, if you are going to run at 8 minutes per kilometre, try and do the first kilometre in 8 minutes and the 42nd kilometre in 8 minutes, and then you've pretty much run the perfect marathon. We've spoken about that great feeling that you get when you cross the finish line. What about recovery? I mean, for me, it can take a while to recover after a marathon, but you've got that euphoria. You will have inevitable soreness, stiffness in the legs. The legs are going to hit the ground maybe 40,000 times running 40 kilometres. That's going to cause lots of little bits of damage within the muscle fibres, having to absorb the impact, then drive off the ground to move you forward. Those muscle fibres are all wrapped in sheaths around each one of the muscles. When they start to bleed a little bit, that causes pressure, and 48 hours after the race, that pressure is at its peak and you feel very stiff and sore. Going upstairs can be a real challenge. Going downstairs can even be a bigger challenge. But of course, also you need to replenish the sort of 2,500-3,000 calories that you've burnt up running the race, and maybe replace 3, 4, 5 litres of fluid that you will have lost from sweating. What sort of recovery strategy do you like to use when you're finished, after you finish your marathon races?
Well, I've tried multiple, to be honest. Usually after the finish line, there's ice bath. It tremendously helps with inflammation, especially after running for 42 kilometers, pounding your feet on the ground for how many steps did you say? That's a big number.
Well, if you're short like me, it's a lot more than for somebody who's a bit taller like you. So it depends on your stride length. But if you say most people's stride length is around just over a metre, and you're covering 42,000 meters, you can work it out roughly. It's about 35 to 40,000, but the taller you are, the fewer strides. So it's easier for tall people. Short people like me have a real even greater challenge running a marathon, Tally.
So ice bath really does work, at least momentarily, to reduce the inflammation. There will be, it's particularly for the first timers, you might feel pains in areas that you haven't experienced before. Hopefully it's not cramps, it's just soreness, and a day, 2 days after that, everything would seem like it's going back to normal, but it still needs time to recover those torn fibers, to get back in time. So don't rush into getting back to running, same pace, same speed, same type of workouts. The 2 or 3 days after the marathon, it might take a week to 2 weeks, depending on how fast your recovery. One little bit of information, a bit of information here with the route in general. Don't do any sharp turns at any point. Sometimes you would run on the middle of the path, or or the middle of the route, and you would see the crowds cheering for you. Sometimes out of excitement, we take that sharp turn to give them high five, and we may end up affecting our knees or ligaments in a way that may be painful toward the end of the marathon. I fell into that trap, to be honest, in New York, where out of excitement, I would high five on each side of the crowds on each side of the path, and I paid the price actually at 25K. It was miserable. But again, it's a learning experience. I don't want people to fall into that trap. Whatever you are, if you want to go and celebrate it with the crowd, just ease into it. Just take a slow turn, like the big round turn, rather than sudden left turn or sudden right turn. Even if in the marathon and the loop, when we go from the Grand Mosque back to Sheikh Rashid's Road, it's going to be a very smooth turn, but try to stay on the outer edge to sort of like ease into it.
Yeah, that's very good.
And that works well for post-marathon recovery as well.
Yeah, some very good tips there, Talib. And I think as well, there's also what you've just touched on is marathon running etiquette, or indeed etiquette of running in any distance. And we've spoken about drink stations. If you are moving across to the side of the road to get a drink, which I hope everybody will be, do that slowly and gradually. Don't suddenly do a sharp step to the left or to the right, because not only is that potentially harmful for yourself, it's also potentially dangerous for people running beside you or behind you, because they can be tripped up, and nobody wants to finish their race because they've fallen or be tripped over by somebody else. And similarly, we've talked about the potential to have to slow down and walk a little bit if you are feeling really bad. If you are going to do that, then it's best to move over to the side of the road where you're out of the way of people who are running past, and just pull over to the slide slowly and carefully, looking over your shoulder, and then walk where you're not in front of people who are going to run up the back of you and potentially hurt themselves. So I think that sort of etiquette is absolutely critical. But again, in terms of recovery, not everybody can have an ice bath. They are there. Not everybody likes them, but I think they do help. They do help. Yeah, they do help initially in that recovery period. I think the most important thing as well, though, is to make sure that you hydrate first and foremost, because you will have lost fluid. And many people really need to rehydrate before they actually need to refuel. Rehydration is so important. And then refueling, which is all about the carbohydrate, replacing the carbohydrate stores that you've used up, and probably not really expecting to be back to full running fitness for another sort of 7 to 10 days after the marathon. And don't worry if it takes you even longer than that. But I would then sort of after a week or so start to think about, I can go out for a short run, 5K, something like that, at a nice comfortable pace, and just reflect on the enjoyment of what you've achieved and the satisfaction in what you've achieved. I don't know, how long do you tend to wait for after a marathon before you run again?
About a week or so. About a week. That first week becomes very, as you said, first 24 hours to 48 hours becomes very, your joints are very stiff. Going up the stairs or coming down from downstairs, it's just going to be a challenge, I would say. Not necessarily just painful, it's just a challenge. Very stiff. Might even have difficulty sleeping immediately after the marathon, even though we'll be completely exhausted and drained. I tried that, actually. I tried to go to sleep immediately after. It just didn't happen. Your body's still working. Your body, your heart's still pumping blood. It just keeps on happening. Just sometime on that same night, this is the evening of the marathon, of the day of the marathon, you're just gonna crash. And you're gonna have probably one of the best night sleeps. Having your medal laying down right next to you on the pillow, just looking at it, taking selfies with it, so it's a reward. It's a reward for running that long.
Yeah, very much so. And you can treat yourself with things that perhaps you wouldn't always have as much of, foods that you like, drinks that you like.
Donuts.
You can spoil yourself. That's the time to relax and recover. Just something that we haven't touched on, and I do want to talk about this, and it may seem a fairly obvious one, but it's what you wear on race day, both on your feet and your clothing. And I think the most important thing, again, is to make sure that you wear stuff that you are used to and that you've worn before, not to go out and buy a brand new pair of shoes because it's the 10K or the marathon coming up, not to wear a new vest or shorts for the first time. Make sure that everything you're wearing is familiar to you. It's not a fashion show, it's a running event, so you've got to make sure that what you're wearing is functional, comfortable, and you're able to run it. And also, if necessary, use petroleum jelly to lubricate parts of your body that may well be rubbing together, causing friction, because in terms of that recovery, we've spoken about in a sense that the damage and what's going on under the skin. There could also be abrasions from friction, blisters, and so on that will take time to recover. But those frictions and that abrasion will be less if you have chosen clothing and footwear that you're familiar with. And boy, will they be much, much worse if you run the race in something that you're not familiar with, that you've never used before. So again, I'm sure everybody you've been working with, Talib, you've been advising them to be very familiar with their clothing, with their footwear, and not to change anything for race day.
I kept on saying that multiple times over. Never try anything new on race day. It even goes, as you said, even the running shorts or the singlets. Sometimes your body might have a certain reaction to a certain fabric. in the shoes manufacturer, they're doing a pretty good job having these bright colors, and people sometimes fall into that trap that I'll get a new shoes that will ensure me that I will run at my optimum performance on race day, so I'm going to save them without breaking the shoes, basically. We're still a week, 10 days away. By now, there should be that one shoe or two pairs of shoes that you're very familiar with for that distance. So stick with them and run your marathon. Don't try anything new on race day. That includes even, maybe you haven't talked about this, a gel. If you're using a gel for your energy gels, don't try anything new on race day ever. If you're not familiar with the brand that will be provided in the course, I think it's goo. Try it now. See if you have any reaction to it. Sometimes people feel nauseous. I know you've spoken about the benefits of benefits / myths about the energy gels, but if you're going to be using that on the race day, make sure that you've used something that you've tried before. Anything new on race day, the odd may not be in your favor.
Yeah, and you've actually touched on one of the first questions that came in this morning, Talib, which is around what electrolyte, what gel could we recommend? And I think you've really answered that, because and I'm not familiar with the brands as much in the UAE as you will be, but the one that's on course is going to work. It'll be fine, but make sure you've tried it before. And I don't know whether there's any others that people might carry with them, Talib, that you would suggest or recommend, or is the one on course absolutely fine for them?
The one in the course is an all-rounder, basically. It's abundant, it's available. Most people that I know, they've used it before. Those who are seasoned marathoners, they opt for different types of gels, but goo should do it. I would just recommend that in the next coming days, you just familiarize yourself with it, the taste, the flavor. You might not like a banana strawberry. You would rather have berries. There will be different flavors on the course, but because it's going to be crowded on the hydration stops, whatever you grab, salted caramel or berries may be the only options available. So I would recommend that you bring your own with you in case, and there will be on the course, in case you run out of gels, there will be plenty of them, along with oranges, bananas, dates, and raisins on the course. So it'd be more than sufficient to get you through all the way to the finish line.
Yeah, and just joining the dots between something else that you said earlier, Tali, which was around, you got tempted to be high-fiving people on the roadside, because people love to be interactive and they like to feel that they've helped or touched a marathon runner. Understandably, the young children who are watching, they're also very keen to offer food, and I've seen young children offering jelly babies, slices of orange, goodness knows what else. My personal recommendation is, whilst it's very generous of them, is not to take them up on their very kind offer, because you don't necessarily know exactly what they're offering you to eat as a snack. You don't know where their hands have been, and you don't know the cleanliness of the food. So I would never risk taking anything from the kind young children that are offering sweets, jelly babies, slices of orange, dates, whatever it might be on the course. I would take it from the official sites, but not the unofficial helpers, because, as I say, it's a risk that's just not worth taking when you're trying to put your body through the 42 kilometers of a marathon.
I would definitely agree on this. I haven't seen it happening in ADNOC Marathon as I've seen it in New York. To be honest, in New York, people will be out of their grocery stores offering you a drink, or people will make some snacks at home, like slices of apples and stuff like that. Some people might be comfortable doing that, but others, as you said, I wouldn't risk it if maybe I'm not used to it. I don't know if an apple would be okay with me or not. But again, these are the kind of nutrition that will be available on the course. Slices of oranges, bananas, dates. If you haven't tried it on your long runs, we have one more long run to go before the big day. So I would say to explore those possibilities. Dates could go a long way. We've tried them in a couple of the last couple of long runs. They're amazing. They're amazing. I would call them the mid-race snack works wonders. But again, we all react to it differently. So I would recommend trying something on the next long run, which is on the 9th of December, and get yourself familiar with it before the big day.
Talib, I'm conscious that we've only got just about 10 minutes to go, and we've talked, and there must be people on the call today thinking they've only talked about the marathon. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about the other distances. And one of the questions that's come in is on the 22k part of the relay, and if they can run 10k in 60 minutes, what's a good pace for 22k, so double the distance. So they're doing 6 minutes per k for 10k. I mean, I guess my suggestion would be that if you can do 6 minutes for 10k, you certainly don't want to be going any faster than 6.5 to 7 minutes per k if you're doing 22k. And if it's your first time over 22k, be conservative and aim probably for the slower end of that, the 7 minutes per k. Does that sort of tie in with your coaching thinking?
I was thinking the same. I was reading the question. Doing 10k in 60 minutes, it's basically running at pace 6, exactly at pace 6. For 22, if it's your first time doing the distance, I would recommend the upcoming long run. Don't do the entire distance, but go a little bit further than 10k. Do them probably at 12 or 13k. Just get yourself in that rhythm of keeping that pace all the way to the end of that distance. There is absolutely no need to push if you're not comfortable with that territory. If you for a faster pace, 10k in 60 minutes, it's a great number. Just keep it consistent, and 22k will go in a breeze. It'll be very easy. You'll be probably laughing by the end of the 22nd K.
Let's hope so. So let's drop down a distance as well to the 10k, which I thoroughly enjoyed running last year. And one of the questions is a constant pace or variable pace for a 10k. I mean, for me, the biggest danger again with the 10k is that you can set off too quickly, and it's pretty much an out and back course, from what I recall, assuming it's the same course from last year. So I would think for me it's a case of going at a sensible pace that you can tolerate and cope with for the first half of the race. When you turn around, and it is quite a sharp turn, to go back on the second 5k, that's the time to think, well, if I've got a bit of energy left, I can push it a little bit, and if I do start to fatigue, then I can always ease back and slow down a bit and still get to the finish line. But it is important to get through that first 5k at a sensible speed. I'd also say something very practical, Talib, and you'll probably all laugh at me, because when I was out last year, I watched the marathon start at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for my 10k start, and it got to about 25 past 6, and I thought, this is strange, where is everybody? Because I was still at the marathon start, and of course I hadn't realised that the 10k start was a little bit further away, and I'd probably already built up some lactic acid and run the best part of the kilometre sprinting from the marathon start to the 10k start, just in time for the gun to go. So I suspect I'm right in thinking that it's all pretty much the same for this year. And if you are doing the 10k, don't make the mistake that I did and wait for everybody to appear at the same starting point of the marathon. It is a different start and heads off in a different direction, but it's a great run. But it's also like the marathon. It does get warmer as the race goes on, and if you are going to be running the 10k in an hour or more, by the time it gets to 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, the heat will be building up. So just be prepared for that and make use of the drink stops that are on the course.
One little addition to that, John, I think you covered it pretty well, is that it will be crowded. So once the gun go off, you would probably see people going at their faster pace. So try to weave your way through them. Sometimes I see people going on the curb. I wouldn't recommend that, to be honest. Just stay on the path, weave along the crowd until you find a pace where you're very comfortable with, and just keep pushing. At some point, you'll probably drop a good number of people, and you'll be probably running with a few at that pace. So again, don't start too fast too soon. unless you're trying to hit a target. Those people will be probably all the way up the front. But if you're doing it to have fun, enjoy, be part of this huge, big celebration, this big event, just make sure that you weave easily, between the crowd.
Yeah, great advice. Absolutely. And again, if you are weaving and working through the crowd, remember not to trip anybody else up. It's the running etiquette that is all important, and it is important to be realistic and sensible at the start. And if it does mean losing a few seconds at the start, because there's people around you and in front of you, don't start pushing them out of the way. You've got plenty of time and distance to make up any time that you lose early in the race. We've just got a few minutes left. There is a question, the distance we haven't covered, which is the 5K, and somebody is asking that they've just entered the 5K this week. Does that give them enough time, but they are fairly fit and exercise regularly? Yeah, I think 5K is a very manageable distance. We have what we call park runs here in the UK, which are weekly free 5-kilometre runs, and I see people every week who are beginners. They mix a bit of jogging, bit of walking, and they get around a 5K very effectively. So I think 5 kilometres is a distance that's a good entry level distance. It's a good beginner's distance to start with. And if you have only decided to enter this week, try and do some running a little bit, get your body used to running, which I'm sure hopefully it will be. And then I think you'll be able to get around the 5K course very effectively and very enjoyably. And then hopefully use that as a stepping stone to do the 10K next year and the marathon the following year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's an experience that everyone should go through. All distances are accommodated. We're about to 23,000 as per the last announcement. Registrations in, and I'm expecting a few more in the coming week or 10 days. Let's all of us be part of this huge, big, the most prestigious running event in the region. It's a memory that will last for a lifetime.
So that's 23,000 for all of the races, is it?
Yes, all distances.
That's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a wonderful event, as it was last year. And it was a real privilege and honour to be out with you all last year and see people finishing all of the distances and massively inspiring, I think, to see. So I think we're drawing to a close now, Talib. I guess it remains for me to wish you all good luck for your marathon number 10 on the 16th, and of course good luck to everybody else who will be joining us. I think there's a few things that we need to go through in a moment just to encourage people to sign up to the webinar again and what have you, but it's been a real honour and pleasure to have done these 3 webinars. I hope you've all gained something from it and enjoyed it, and it's been good to meet everybody virtually again this year. Yeah, Talib, do you want to just say a few words about joining the Wellable Challenge?
Yes. Make sure you join the Wellable program to unlog your kilometers. There will be a price by the end of it. Make sure that you register, follow the steps on that QR code, and you never know, you might be a lucky winner.
Good, and thank you for all the questions that have come through on the chat. We haven't had a chance to answer all of them, but as with previous weeks, we'll do a Q&A session that will be posted on the website later on in the week. So feel free to add any questions that you haven't had answered yet to the chat, and we'll do our very best to get back to you. The date is set, the clock is ticking, 10 days to go. You can still sign up for the exclusive discount using the code, but whatever distance you're doing, whether it's 2.5K, 5K, 10K, the marathon relay, or the marathon itself, enjoy your running, enjoy the day. I hope that we've given you some top tips over the course of these 3 webinars that will be of value to everybody. It's certainly, as I say, been a real honour and pleasure to have been involved again this year. I wish you all every success. Talib, thank you once again. It's been great to see you and to have this conversation today, which I've found hugely beneficial and enjoyable. And as I say, good luck to everybody and happy Christmas as well. Thank you, Talib.
Thank you.